Okay, so in this video we're going to look at what happens when the terms in our polynomials, the first thing has more than one thing in it. Particularly, we're going to look at an example of a two-term polynomial times another polynomial. Now this is the long way. We're going to do this method this one time, and then we're not going to bother with it. We're going to come up with a shorter way, a more generalized way to do these problems, just a little bit quicker. Because this long way does take a bit of time and a bit of writing. But we're going to do it so we can discover a shorter way. So here we have the problem x minus 4 times 3x plus 5. Now, the only tool we have at our disposal is our distributive property. So using our distributive property, what we're going to do is treat that first thing there, the x minus 4, as if it's just one whole object, all stuck together inside that quantity. So we're going to be able to distribute that just like we did in the examples in the previous video where it was a single term polynomial. So as we multiply through, we'll have x minus 4 times 3x. Now for convenience, and because it's the way we're used to seeing it, I'm going to put that 3x first. So x minus 4 times 3x, I can write it down with the x minus 4 first, or with the 3x first. We're just used to seeing things with the single term first, so that's what I did. And then x minus 4 is going to get multiplied times the plus 5. So that'll be 5 and x minus 4 being multiplied. And again, I'm writing the single term down first. Now, if you look at what we now have, we have two single term multiplication problems, 3x times x minus 4 and 5 times x minus 4. So I can distribute the 3x into both of those, and I can distribute the 5 into both of those in the second part. Now I'm going to write this out this time because I want to be real clear on what's happening, and we're going to actually use this a little bit later on as we work out the problem and look for the shorter way. So 3x times x and 3x times 4, so minus 3x times 4. That takes care of my first one, and then we move to the 5 times x minus 4. So that would be 5 times x minus 5 times 4. And at this point, we can go ahead and just simplify. We can go ahead now and just simplify. So 3x times x becomes 3x squared. 3x times 4 becomes 12x, so minus 12x. 5 times x would just be 5x, so plus 5x. And 5 times 4 is 20, so that's where the minus 20 comes in. And then at this point, we just go through, like we did in the last section, and we simplify our polynomial. So we have a 3x squared, but that's it. But in the middle, we do have the minus 12x and the plus 5x. So we can go ahead and put those together. Minus 12 plus 5 is going to be minus 7x. And then we just have the minus 20 left over. So we put all that together and write down our answer, which is 3x squared minus 7x minus 20. Now, this was a bit of a tedium to get there. You know, a lot of writing, and it turns out we can actually leave that stuff off. We can actually leave that stuff off because we're going to shorten this process. So a lot of the writing that we just did, turns out we can actually leave it out. And to see how we can leave that out, let's go back and look at my multiplication problem again. So x minus 4 times 3x. And at this point, I'm going to focus on this step right here, where I have each of my different multiplications. I want to look at where those came from. So the first thing I see there is I have a 3x times x. Well, notice that came from taking the x and the 3x and just multiplying them. Okay. The next thing we have here is 3x times 4. Well, the 3x and the 4 came about from multiplying those two things. And then we have a 5 and an x. So I'll mark that in green. That's just the x and the 5 being multiplied. And finally, I have a 5 and a 4. And that came about from multiplying the 5 and the 4 together. And so here's what I want you to see. Don't worry about any fancy algorithms or anything. fancy procedures. All we're going to do is take everything in the first little polynomial here times everything in the second one. And so notice that there's just a line drawn from each thing in the first one to each thing in the second one. And then we just multiply those out. X times 3x is where I got my 3x squared from. X times 5 is where I get my 5x from. So I'm actually going to write that first. So taking the first term there, x times both of them, the things in the other one. And then 4 and 3 is where I got my minus 12x. And then 4 and 5 is where I got my minus 20. And then we can just combine like terms like we did before. Okay, so it turns out this idea works whether the first thing has 2 things in it, or 3 things in it, or 5 things in it, and it doesn't matter how many terms are in the second one. We're just always going to take each thing in the first one times each thing in the second one. As long as we remember that, we'll be able to get through these multiplication problems without too much difficulty.